All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar, Zapier for Marketers. I know you probably have a lot of things you could be doing, so we really appreciate that you're spending it here with us. My name is Katie, and I'm going to be moderating today's event. And before we get started, I just want to go over a few housekeeping items. So first of all, this webinar will be recorded, and you'll get an email with the recording tomorrow morning, so just look out for that. And next, all attendees are muted, but if you have questions, please put them in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll have Lori on the line from our support team who will try her best to get to those during the webinar. We'll also have time at the end of the webinar for Stu to answer some questions live, but just to reiterate, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box at the bottom, not in the chat box, so then we can easily answer them and find them. There will also be a survey at the end of the webinar, and we'd love it if you could fill it out and give us any feedback you might have so that we can improve all of our future webinars. All right, so let's get started. I would like to introduce our speaker today, Stuart Halley, the head of marketing at CBO. With over 15 years of experience under his belt, Stu has provided digital strategies and marketing support for thousands of companies all around the world, including Disney, Vodafone, Volkswagen, IGA, and more. Always at the forefront of the latest digital and creative trends, Stu has helped bridge the gap between conceptual and practical strategy development whilst retaining a tailored approach to brand and user engagement. Always inquisitive and an avid fan of all things tech related, Stu and his team at CBO have embraced automation as a part of their daily operations and strategy development to provide a full service solution that keeps on giving. We're super lucky to have him here today to show us how to use Zapier for marketers. And all right, one more thing, reminder, you can ask all the questions you want in the question box at the bottom of your screen, and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar, or we'll try our best to have Lori get those in real time. And without further ado, I am going to let Stu take it away. Thanks, Stu.
No worries. Thanks very much, Katie. I appreciate the invitation, obviously, to join Zapier today. Obviously hosting this webinar and just running through a few marketing agendas with Zapier and what we can do. So before we dive in too deep, I just wanted to go over a bit of an agenda, what we're going to go through. So essentially, just do an introduction on myself, then we'll get down to the sort of meat and potatoes of it. So just looking at some automation practices and how we would use that in a general marketing sense. Really then moving more in towards how we get started and the creative aspects behind that, and then diving into Zapier itself, into some use cases. So before I continue on, just a little bit more about my background from that nice introduction. So my name is Stuart. I'm the head of marketing at CBO in Sydney, Australia. So apologies if it seems a bit dark on my video. It's currently 6 o'clock in the morning here. Very cold, very wet outside, as you can imagine. My role at CBO is actually managing the agency division, so looking after the whole marketing team. So we are a multifaceted team of account managers. We are working across multiple digital areas, from SEO to paid media services and automation email marketing strategies in between. We obviously utilize Zapier as a tool to bridge all of that together, of which we'll go through some components today. So I have been working within digital for 15 years, probably a little bit longer. I first dabbled when I was working with GeoCities, Alta Vista, Netscape, if people remember banner exchange programs. That was my forte, sort of what got me interested in this. But over the years, I had built up a range of knowledge and experience working across different systems, more recently with Salesforce, Pipedrive, Autopilot, HubSpot, etc. So that is obviously adapting as client demands grow. And yes, my accent is quite varied. Please mind it, I have lived in 12 different countries, so it's a bit of a mishmash of everything at this point. So having done that, let's dive in. So the purpose of automation and marketing. So what we're looking at is most people here probably having some form of marketing background or currently having some marketing experience. Your role's probably compiled more so of actually developing marketing strategies within your business. So I'm not here to actually tell you how to run the marketing strategies themselves, but more so how you can leverage Zapier. So at the moment, your strategy probably looks something like this. So you're probably multi-channel, you're probably touching on all of these, if not some or potentially more, segmented in various different ways. And those ways can typically be adhered to new versus existing customers within each channel segment. So each one of those channels specifically being broken down, typically remarketing campaigns being active, so that you can obviously drive lower cost per clicks, higher return of investment, etc. Now, those strategies are very essential and obviously best practice when it comes to digital. However, the more in depth you go with those strategies, the more layered you can become in terms of segmentation. So new versus existing turns into loss versus won. And all of a sudden, when you start to look at cross-channel pollination and adaptive marketing, you come to a situation where you have a lot of data being shared across a lot of different channels, potentially creating a spider web of chaos and leading to a whole bunch of stress that no one really wants in their day-to-day job. So this is where Zapier comes into play, and how we as an agency use Zapier to actually help manage that workload, those workflows from a user experience, and create just a better overall journey for the user. So with that, let's start by looking at some of the problem areas within digital overall. So with marketing specifically, the barriers that exist are really defined by human engagement and interest. So each area of marketing is effective in the sense that you're setting up an individual channel. However, the user engagement is something that is derived more of personal interest. So each channel operates individually, yet each is capable of adapting to certain user behaviors with the data that you've obtained. So essentially nothing is static when it comes to digital. And this is something that has evolved over the years. So the internet is not linear. So we all use the internet differently. Essentially my patterns of how I use the web to obtain information are going to be different than anyone else's. But equally to that, we've all learned to adapt with digital and learn how things work. So remarketing has become more prevalent in recent years. People are becoming more savvy to the likes of banner ads, potentially stock imagery becoming an issue as well. So these are things that, we try to caveat by creating a better user experience. But in that area becomes a lot of development and potential for conflict when it comes to the absence of data. So user data is essential in driving a more consistent and fluent journey. However, if the data is not there, it becomes a bit of a headache in terms of managing all of those sources and getting them to collaborate and work together. And that's really where it takes time to then choreograph marketing opportunities. So several people right now might obviously be spending a lot of time utilizing these strategies to build them out manually or have their team work on them. And that is obviously a great thing to do. However, it's very time consuming at the same time. And obviously another point with digital is that it's very cookie cutter based. So you want to try and avoid going down that path of just having a simple remarketing strategy based on landing page visits or product visibility. So having a different approach of how you can leverage user data is going to help you stand out in the marketplace and differentiate. And ultimately what it comes down to is digital really needs a centralized data point to work from. So within digital, traditionally, and a lot of the companies that I've worked with in the past, they might have certain systems, but they're not set up to integrate well with marketing opportunities. So that is something that obviously taking into account is going to help create a more robust and adaptive marketing plan moving forward. And really that's where it all starts when it comes to Zapier, is understanding that data, how you can best leverage that and drive the most efficient strategies for optimal customer engagement. So if we look forward to how we can create smarter opportunities, it really is going to be subjective based on an individual's needs. And when I say that, it means that every person is unique, obviously using the internet in a different way, but understanding those needs is going to be essential to driving a more responsive and adaptive marketing plan. So that really starts by understanding the capabilities of your data. Having a CRM in place as a single source of truth is obviously an optimal outcome or a place to start when it comes to creating a plan. And then specifying the criteria for that as well with what that optimal journey looks like. So how do you want people to actually work through this process? How do you want them to become acquired into your sales funnel and to build a sale? And essentially what that means is you're defining categories. You're building lead acquisition funnel. You want users to obviously interact with certain points, but obtaining that data along the way to then refine your customer journey as you build and adapt your plans. And that's where building wireframes and segmentation models really comes into play, and how Zapier can really be utilized to sort of be the building block to utilize with other systems when you're sharing that data between platforms. So connecting audience segments is obviously something that we would do in real time, that you would utilize that CRM data to then build upon those opportunities. And then ideally what you want is moving forward a plan that's consistently adapting and is monitoring user engagement so that the CRM is effectively retraining itself to feed into your marketing strategies moving forward. So with that said, an example of some of the data that you can obtain through your CRM, this is going to be not new to anyone here, but obviously NAP information, your name, address, phone number is obviously going to be quite important to have a single point of truth, point of reference that can now also be matched up to utilize within analytics information as well. So typically that's collected in the CRM, but you can cross-reference that with an analytics ID for further investigation if you need to go down that path. Other components, standard stuff that go into CRM, such as sales, purchase history, customer value, channel source, etc. All the standards that you probably want to collect data on. But with that, what you then allow users to do is build a more robust funnel, and Zapier can help sort of step in and be the stepping stone essentially to manage that. So with that CRM data, for example, you'll lead it through Zapier, connect it with the relevant systems, and all of a sudden you've got a bridge to then work with several different platforms. So you can feed that data through into Google Ads, display, email marketing, social, and create a more robust real-time strategy that is adaptive based on users' current needs. And it's going to adapt in real time moving forward. So every time that customer record gets updated, they can feed through Zapier into a relevant campaign through one of those channels, and then ultimately feed it back into the CRM so it remains updated and relevant moving forward. Now, doing that is going to take some time to set up. Obviously, the more channels you have originally, it's going to take time setting up what those display banners look like for each individual journey, whether users get added, excluded, or segmented in certain ways. Obviously, it's very dependent upon what that strategy entails as well. But the ultimate goal here is using Zapier to help automate a more engaged audience segment. And that's the power that comes from the CRM themselves, where Zapier is then feeding the data through to the relevant channel. So all of a sudden, when you start to break it down, the marketing channel that you have, where all those crazy channels that you're all working with, can really be tailored to a personalized level. So for example, I've got myself here. I might have originally come through Google Ads, but now I'm being targeted specifically through 4 other channels relevant to my journey that I have experienced and the landing pages that I've viewed potentially, just depending on the setup of your strategy. But Zapier will help bridge the gap between that, and that's how we use it as an agency ourselves. So we use Zapier more to drive the efficiencies in learning. So learning management, data segmentation, and really building that customer profile so we get a better understanding of what each individual user looks like, and categorizing that then helps us analyze the data moving forward so we can help create more robust marketing plans moving forward. So essentially, you're just looking to work smarter, not harder. One of our mottos here is obviously just trying to get the automation to work as much as we can. So in effect, reducing a lot of the manual labor that comes with digital marketing, specifically with paid media channels, There's a lot of optimization that takes place within campaign management, specifically with campaign creation and ad formatting. When you start looking at audience segments that you want to create custom solutions for, having a system like Zapier in place that can share that data for you is really powerful, really valuable, but also saves us a lot of time with my team and the 8 staff that we have. So that's done, very well said, done and dusted. It's sort of a breakdown as to what strategies you're probably adhering to already, but really wanting to focus more on Zapier themselves and the tool, how it can provide a solution to drive that concept forward. So how can you actually get started with Zapier in defining an action to then build a marketing plan from? And that's where we originally start, I guess, with CBO. We start by asking clients to define their function. And this is going to be different for every individual client. Obviously, each business has their own standards and business operations that they run with, but it is vital to mapping out an effective workflow. And that technique is going to be very dependent upon each individual business's technologies, their system integrations, but ultimately it has to start with a function. So these are some core questions that we would ask our clients. When it comes to automation, what are you trying to do? But what is your business focused on primarily? And some example questions are, what is the core objective of your business? What are the system technologies that you rely on? And probably one of the biggest ones that we have is what are the bottlenecks that people are adhering to? What's something that they're having to step in and manually get involved to fix and provide a solution. And that's where we want Zapier and automation to come in and help answer that question. So when it comes to defining the function, typically, there are some standards that we see. So obviously, people want to reduce labor, they want to reduce costs, save time. These are all the standard ones, but I think specifically when it comes to marketing, as the example I ran through previously, you can use Zapier to help manage a lot of different avenues in creating a segmented marketing campaign that is adaptive over time, and it's adaptive in real time based on user action and engagement. So that's how we would approach it. It always starts with the client sort of understanding what that function is and how they want to move forward. So what are some of the common Zapier connections that we see as an agency? It's really dependent, but a lot of them are actually quite simple. When it comes to the sort of standards out-of-the-box solutions, a lot of that we see are businesses that are more focused on getting automation set up initially. So they haven't gone too deep into what Zapier's capabilities are. They're basically just looking to integrate system capabilities. So that would include things like uploading form submissions from your website to your CRM, creating invoices, obviously from CRM data to Xero or whatever financial system you're using, email providers, whether you're working with MailChimp, HubSpot, Autopilot, and potentially channel marketing segmentation as well. So specifically when you're looking to break things down into campaigns based on that audience data. That's traditionally where we actually see users coming through and engaging with Zapier. But that's typically just a starting point. Once we assess and speak to clients, we typically unlock a sort of a light bulb moment, as we call it, where they then realize the capabilities of Zapier and how much time it can save them. So the most common connections typically lead to more complex ones moving forward because the capability is outlined and then obviously the strategy is adapted from there. So some of those use cases, for example, can just be things like Shopify to Salesforce, AppDrive to MailChimp, Facebook leads going into ActiveCampaign. Pretty standard basic stuff. Doesn't take too long to set up. And Zapier has a fantastic FAQ sort of guide to walk you through how to set this up as well. But for the more complex roles within marketing specifically and Zapier's capabilities, it does require an element of creativity. So the creativity is something that is quite hard to obviously build up upon, because, you know, how do you learn to be creative? And how do you know what other solutions potentially exist if you don't have experience working within the tool itself? So that's where we come in. So we try to think outside the box a little bit, but it really starts with understanding, you know, how creative you can be. So there is a formula for creativity. I'm not sure if people are aware, but it's Ruth Noller's formula. So essentially, creativity is a function of knowledge, imagination, and evaluation. So this is a legitimate formula, but it's effectively very true. So, you know, creativity is derived from having experience, essentially, but also having the focus and imagination to look beyond just standard capability. And that's something that's really hard to train. You can't really force people into training it if they don't know where to start. So that's what we want to focus on next, is what are some of the things that you can do where Zapier's out-of-the-box solutions potentially don't answer the questions that you want or provide an outcome that you want. However, the capability is there, you just aren't aware of its potential. And that's where we really start to say, you know, we build the box. We don't think outside the box. And that's, again, when we say Zapier is bound by your own creativity in achieving those desired outcomes. So it's really about understanding where you want to start and what your function is, and looking at the capabilities of the systems that you're looking to integrate, and what technologies are at your disposal, and then seeing what is beyond that to get the solution, optimal solution achieved. So that can be a very drawn out experience. It's good to actually map lines to draw out the flow, just sketch it out on a piece of paper, brainstorm, just to effectively understand how they want the process to work. And then what we do is we would then look to see where Zapier can fill in the blanks with the standard out-of-the-box solutions, and then have more complex custom creative solutions to act as glue that cement everything together. Defining the operations is obviously a key component of that. So understanding the CRM, if you have one, what is the single source of truth that you're going to be compiling data from to build these apps? And then obviously in understanding and establishing the foundation that you want to work from. The rest is really just the creative components that come in between. So once you've assessed what the capabilities are, you then focus on the components where there is no solution. And traditionally that would come into play when you have systems that might not have a Zapier connection built in. But there might potentially still be a solution that you can work around, for example, using Google Sheets. Typically, some software systems might have a Google Sheets integration, but not a Zapier integration. So it's just looking at the capabilities of each individual platform. And then once you've got all that data, assessing what the overall solution is going to be as a part of your full Zapier automation journey. And that's where you can really get into some funky stuff when it comes to Zapier. There's a lot of capability when it comes to the Zapier tools themselves. So the tools that Zapier has actually produced, as well as some of the other software and systems that are integrated. And I think that suite of tools really aids you in being able to be a bit more creative in coming up with those solutions. So some examples of that would be running some scripts and code just based on specific action. You've got email parsing tools available, which can obviously scrape emails that potentially aren't a Zapier integration that's available. You've got company submitted data that can create conditional workflows and values, crawling information from third-party sources, and then updating spreadsheets dynamically. So the capabilities that Zapier has is actually quite powerful in providing you with an optimal outcome. It's just understanding, again, what the capabilities are of the systems that you want to work with collectively. So for example, these are actually live examples. So we have these running at the moment for some clients as well as ourselves. So with new orders coming in through Shopify, updating spreadsheet rows, and then that feeds into another system. So for this client specifically, they wanted to run Shopify orders that then updated with their postal information. So postal records and calculating estimated shipping times. With very specific systems and business operations that they had set up. So standard rule for this is obviously setting up a Shopify Zap that every time it runs, it then populates specified columns and outline templates, so to speak, within Google Sheets. And then with that data, they can feed it through into their other systems. One standard simple solution that you can look at. Probably something a little bit more complex is looking at Zapier's mail parsing tool. Every time you get an email coming through, that you can scrape this and actually capture data to push through into Zapier and then leverage into other systems that Zapier connects with. So we use this with software that potentially doesn't have a Zapier connector, but will prompt an email being sent. So we just simply set up the parser tool to scrape the email, capture the data points, and create the record within Zapier to then leverage elsewhere in the system. And finally, one that's probably the most complex is when you start running your own code and your own Python scripts. So adding users to lists to then run them through a Python script to obtain more data. So an example of this would be when you have obtained, say, an email address, you've got a customer record that's built in a CRM or database, and you want to get more information on that customer. So potentially, looking at their email domain, where's their website based, what's their IP, all that standard stuff that you can capture and collate more into a robust customer record. With that data, obviously, then lends to other opportunities, so you can do more robust marketing. So, for example, email marketing. Once you capture that information, you'll know exactly where the company's based, potentially where their head office is or their phone number, and you can start to customize their emails more specifically, even though they haven't fully provided you with all that information. So just looking at some takeaways in general from everything we've walked through, that really automations has to start with that core focus and understanding the objectives that you're looking to adhere to. From a marketing perspective, obviously looking at KPIs, ROI, it does come into play when you start looking at multi-channel segmentation, adaptive marketing strategies. Multi-channel is going to be very focused on getting a lot of data speaking between systems, but that's where Zapier can come in and help build those foundations to evolve where those efficiencies are being developed. And that's ultimately where you want to be when it comes to marketing, because you're then going to start saving a lot of time when it comes to creating campaigns and moving audience segments around. You can have Zapier do it for you and integrate with your marketing channels that you want to effectively focus on. So very focused on maximizing the ROI, as well as saving time and boosting that productivity. The main components for us as an agency is streamlining that marketing operations component. However, our clients are appreciating that it does streamline their sales funnel and increasing customer retention and engagement when it comes to looking at cross-sell, upsell opportunities, as well as captivating new versus existing audiences and lost versus won. So there are a lot of different options in terms of what Zapier has for you to work with. It really just depends on what your KPIs and objectives are from a marketing perspective, but there is an endless opportunity with Zapier that we as an agency utilize pretty much day in and day out in setting up automation workflows, and then focusing more on campaign structure and segmentation to capture that user interest and drive that engagement moving forward. So with that said, that is the end of the presentation. I do encourage that if we have any attendees in Australia to jump onto our website at www.cbo.me. We actually have an automation demo where you can text in of the segmentation things that we discussed, as well as the more complex Zapier capabilities are part of that journey. So you can get to experiencing them in real time, but happy to run through any questions at this moment in time. So thanks very much.
Amazing. Thanks, Stu. That was awesome. So if you guys have any other questions for Stu, please put them in the Q&A box and we will try to get to those. I do have here's a question, Stu, and I don't know if you already mentioned about segment, but this person says, curious about the intersection of Zapier use cases and segment. Do any of your clients use both?
Sorry, the line broke up there.
Oh, sorry about that. It said, curious about the intersection of Zapier use cases and segment. Do any of your clients use both?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's dependent upon obviously each client, but we do have some that are looking at using audience segmentations and then specific use cases. So it's sort of adaptive based on the strategy that they want to run, but effectively we want to push people through into certain use cases where that segmentation is fit. So it really just depends on what your strategy looks like overall, but it is something that obviously we would promote, because the more segmented you can have your journey, the more responsive and potentially better performance you're going to see on the other end.
Great. Okay, this question is, I often look to Zapier to find great tools, but what content segmentation tools work well with Zapier?
There are a range, to be honest. When it comes to content, I'm presuming that's going to be talking more about content creation. So actual, content platforms. There's a few that comes to mind. Verblio is one that we are using and obviously familiar with, that when content is created, it can help lead through a certain funnel that leads to notifications internally for us, as well as, client contact and communication. So content can also be used dynamically. So if you want to start using Zapier data to field into dynamic content when it comes to landing page development, that is something that can be done. It just depends on the systems and software that you want to integrate, but ultimately it has to start with, again, a CRM component. So you're collecting data from somewhere. If you want to run with dynamic content, then it's going to have to pull from somewhere. So it just depends.
Okay, great. Okay, does your entire marketing team or your clients' marketing teams know how to use Zapier, or do you have certain people on the team that are master users?
We probably have, so within the team, we have 8 people in our marketing team. We probably have about 11 people in our business who know how to use Zapier total. I'd say probably about 4 of them are more master Zapier users, whereas the rest are, not as experienced and hands-on, but they understand the capabilities of it. So it's definitely a learning opportunity, but we've got some pretty heavy hitters in our team who can help drive things forward.
Great. All right, we have another question. Is there Zapier training available to get certified, or what resources can you recommend? And yes, we do have Zapier 101 videos on our YouTube, and we also have a bunch of helpful resources to help you get started. We have a getting started guide. It's just, I can actually post that in the chat box so you guys can find it. I don't know, Stu, if you have any other ideas on how people can learn how to use Zapier.
Yeah, I think the best thing is, like, Zapier has a fantastic website with a lot of FAQs and sort of guides on how to set things up. I definitely recommend checking that out. When in doubt, I tell people this all the time, but just go to Google, just do a search. Sometimes you'll find people on YouTube just make videos that might answer your question, even though they're not working with Zapier. But ultimately, my experience, the best thing you can do is just jump in there and just utilize a trial and just get hands-on experience and seeing how this works. A lot of the time, it's not going to be as complex as what people make it out to be. And Zapier does provide a lot of documentation to help walk you through, even when you're connecting the systems in real time. So yeah, just reach out or just double check on Google or watch some of the YouTube videos on Zapier's channel.
Great. Okay, we've got a lot of questions about your favorite apps. What app saves you the most time or makes you feel most productive on your marketing team? Or maybe that your clients love the most?
Yep. One of our go-to apps is actually Autopilot. Autopilot saves us a lot of time when it comes to integration Primarily, it's an email marketing tool, but also feeds through into SMS marketing as well. But the audience segmentation capabilities within that platform do allow you to connect directly with Google Ads and Facebook ads as well. And it also acts as a website scraping tool. So from a cost perspective, it's really efficient, but it's quite powerful in what it does under the hood compared to other similar systems that traditionally do tack on a lot of other stuff that potentially isn't needed. So we're a big fan of Autopilot when it comes to marketing strategy development, because once you have a centralized database, and even utilizing Zapier on its own, Autopilot on its own, is going to provide you with the power to create very specific segments moving forward, as well as monitoring those customer records in real time based on landing page performance, channel segmentation, and then really what you want to do with the data, just feed it through to the relevant channels. So Zapier ticks a lot of boxes. Autopilot ticks a lot of boxes for us, just because it actually has a lot of integrations with platforms that we currently use in a digital marketing sense.
Great. That is a great answer, because we just got another question. If you're starting from scratch, what CRM, email automation software, SMS text, and other tools would you recommend so it could be easily integrated?
Yeah, check out, I'm not going to plug them too much, but yeah, autopilothq.com. Just check them out. They're really good. I think when it comes to a CRM, Autopilot is not a traditional CRM. So it is acting more like a database. But if you are looking at CRMs, I'm personally a big fan of Pipedrive. Pipedrive's capabilities, in addition to their support, is fantastic. And their integrations with Zapier and a lot of other software is pretty open. The capabilities of what you can do there is pretty unlimited. So again, bound by your own creativity, but definitely check out Pipedrive and Autopilot if you get a chance.
Awesome. All right. And I have had a few questions about the recording, and we will be sending that out tomorrow morning. So look out for that. You'll have it in your inbox. And okay, here's another one. Have you used Zapier with LinkedIn lead ads or Facebook lead ads to Google Sheets?
Yep, definitely. Simple, just scraping data. So once those leads ads are generated, populate them through Zapier, put them in a sheet. A pretty standard output. It just depends on what you want to do with it. So what's the outcome? What's your focus in putting in the Google Sheet? Is it intended to then feed into another system? Are you collating data, for reporting or whatever it might be? Just always think about what the outcome is going to be, because potentially creating a bottleneck is something that you don't want to do.
Great. Okay, so you talked a little bit about email parsing. Would that be something that I could use for a contact us form, or do you have examples for what you would parse out of an email and where you'd send that information?
Yeah, for sure. So a contact us form, so typically I'm assuming it's on a website. You would probably want to automate that. So once your form is submitted on your website, it gets scraped and put into your database or CRM automatically. That's a standard, pretty much out of the box connection that Zapier can help you with straight away. When it comes to email parsing, the way that we would recommend using it is if you want to automate something, but there isn't an automation connection that exists. So some like OneFlare is the example that I had in the presentation. They send an email out every time a lead comes through. So they don't have a direct connection into Zapier, but with that email template that they send out every time a lead is fired, it's pretty much the same template every time, just different fields are populated. So it'll process name, location, phone number, email address. And those are things that you want the parser to do. So you're just training the system to say, hey, every time this email comes into my inbox, scrape it and then marry them up with the fields in Zapier, so that I can use those fields for other things in my workflow and my journey.
Love it. All right, it looks like we have time for one more question. Let's see. I don't know if you've worked with e-commerce sites before, but if so, can you give an example or case scenario where an e-commerce site can best optimize Zapier?
Yep, definitely. E-commerce, obviously very product focused. So we have experience working with, WooCommerce and Shopify. Probably Shopify is the main one that we hear from. You want to be able to capture that user data and what the customer was interested in, but also what they purchased. So with Zapier and that adaptive marketing funnel, it's all about the cross-sell, upsell when it comes to e-commerce. So you want to be able to understand what people have been interested in, what they've looked at. And once you've obtained their data, then start going down a certain marketing path. And that's where you can start integrating with your standard digital marketing channels. So your Facebook, your Google ads, etc. Once you capture that data, then you start moving more into an upsell, cross-sell strategy. So that might be seasonal. It might be certain sales or promotions that you're running. And again, utilizing some of these systems like Autopilot can also track what landing pages people are viewing on your site when they do come back. And you can update customer records in real time based on what they're viewing. And then that can lead into other marketing segments. So, Sally originally bought a pair of shoes. She then went away for 2 months and saw an ad for shoes again, came back, but ended up looking at, hoodies or dresses or something. So add her to that segment, start showing your ads for other products that she potentially is going to be upsold into. Really just depends on how you segmented the data, but there is a lot of opportunity with e-commerce, probably more so than other industries, just because you've got multiple data capture points, not just a standard landing page visit.
Awesome. Wow, you are just a wealth of information. This is great. Thank you, Stu. Thanks for the presentation. That was awesome. Thank you, everybody who showed up. I hope you learned a lot. We will be sending out the recording tomorrow morning. And I hope, Stu, thanks for getting up early for us. And I hope that everyone has a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Thanks very much, everyone. Appreciate your time.